morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to our Tidbits of History for June 2011. I'd like to remind you before it begins to turn off your cell phones or any other noisemakers that you might have on your possession. And we welcome today Danielle Miller, who is a member of our genealogy staff, and she's going to talk to us about the old plantation homes of Louisiana.
Good morning. I thought I was going to have just a couple of people, so I made a presentation to show in the dark, and now I feel embarrassed to turn my back to you. Not only that, I even have my American uncle and aunt here, Julie and Uncle Remy. So I'm going to talk to you today about the plantations.
Uncle Remy?
Yes. And of course, when I did the research, I found a lot of things that you all know. And we'll start with just the beginning. The plantation culture starts, of course, with the river. And in those days, no roads. I don't think there were much infrastructure until Huey Long. So the main access in and out of plantations was the river, as well for traveling as for bringing in goods or taking out goods. When the French came, they parceled out the river they parceled out the land in long, narrow strips, so that everybody would get access to that main thoroughfare. And this is an early map. This is a Spanish map, actually. You can see how the strips are cut. These people are lucky. They have a bayou and a river. It's a little rudimentary. Oops. This is getting more organized. You probably recognize if it's Lake Pontchartrain. This is the river. Here's New Orleans. Here's the French Quarter. Here were a series of plantations. Remember this little curve in the river? On this side was the site of Uncle Sam Plantation. I'll talk about it a little later in the presentation, but it was literally across the river from Audubon Park. And as they get more and more organized, the maps are starting to really fill in. It's really interesting to see the original plots of lands along the river, and then once you get away from the river, then the land is cut in a grid pattern. I thought that was really interesting, and that probably came a little later. This one is, I couldn't resist this one. This is a map of Baton Rouge. Actually, it's not a map of Baton Rouge, it's the area, but here is Baton Rouge, and here's the land around it. Around here was the site of the plantation Seven Oaks, just south of Baton Rouge. Remember that one too. I'll talk about it in a minute. Of course, us Europeans, our view of plantations was gone with the wind, you know? Just like Americans think of European castles as, you know, the fairy tale. It was not like that. And I know you all know that. This is just a romantic view. This is one of the very early plantations. This one is a little north of Baton Rouge on the west side of the river, on False River.
We've been there.
You've been there? And that's lucky because at times you can visit it, and then at times it's closed to the public. Mm-hmm. So I was lucky to see it too, yes. This plantation inspired a French author like Margaret Mitchell, except it's a man, and he wrote, I think it was a 5-volume saga about the history. He was inspired by the story of the plantation owners, the original owners. This is some of the books, and actually I have some of them on the table behind, so if you want to glance at it, you can look. If you can read French, you can borrow it. He also wrote with his wife a nonfiction book about plantations, which was the only book I could find about plantations when I first came here in '76. I could not find a single book with photos or explanations about the plantations. So I bought that book in '76 or '77, and I have used it ever since. I think I have seen all the plantations in the book. Since then, some new ones have opened up, but it was really shocking to me to not have any tourism brochures or anything about plantations in those days. And you will see something important later on. So these are the books he wrote. And this is the lady that was the owner of Parlange Plantation. Her name was Virginie. In the book, in the saga, he names her Virginie Trégan, which is almost Trahan. And, but she really did exist. The saga is woven around her and around her family. But this lady really existed. And this is a painting by her, full-size painting, which is in the plantation, by John Singer Sargent. The painting is so big that the ceilings of the plantation cannot quite accommodate it. So the bottom of the frame is on the floor and the top is touching the ceiling. It is that big. Of course, this is an early plantation, so it doesn't have those tall, 18-foot ceilings. It's more like a 10-foot ceiling, but still, it's a huge painting. His books were translated in 25 languages. I am looking for them in English. I have not found them yet, but I know they are translated in English. That's another thing that puzzles me. This is a story about Louisiana. It's translated in English. You can buy it in England, but I haven't found it here. It's a shame. Yeah. And I read it. It's a historical fiction, but it was really good. And I checked his information against what I discovered then and later, and I don't find any fault with it. Of course, the reality of the plantations was something else. The plantation was really a working farm, and this is not even an early one. Parlange was really an early one. Then you had a farm and a few outbuildings, and then you had people working on the farm. Here, by this time, this is Evergreen. It was built in the mid-19th century. By then, they are pretty organized. They are building outbuildings. They have slave cabins. They have storage facilities. It's really like a small enterprise. And of course, this is due to the arrival or the growth of sugarcane. First, the first crops that were harvested in Louisiana that the planters made money from were indigo and cotton, of course, a little bit further north. I'm probably forgetting one or two, but these crops were not sustaining enough. You were not going to become a millionaire on that. And then one Frenchman decided to try out, from what I remember on Bert Wolf's travels, he stole some plant of sugarcane from the what do you call that, museum with plants in Paris, and brought it to Martinique, and discovered that sugarcane was really doing good. And the French introduced sugarcane here in Louisiana on a small basis. And as discoveries came about and people, technology became better, you had refining and granulation being developed in the 19th century. Then the sugar industry really took off, was a huge boom. And of course, the more you eat sugar, the more you want sugar. So it was a self-propelling event, up until the beginning of the 19th century. Sugar was really a rare commodity. But as sugar is being produced and exported to the world, especially to Europe, where they cannot grow it, it becomes really a huge cash crop. This is the slave cabins at Evergreen. And along with about 10, 12 slave cabins on the LSU campus, these are probably the only pretty full remaining village of slave cabins. Some planters, as you know, were pretty mean, and some others were pretty nice. And I'll tell a little story about Seven Oaks in a minute. This was one of the original designs. This was the plain farmhouse, and built like Parlange and d'Estrahan. This is Laura Plantation. Laura Plantation, I don't know if you know, didn't exist anymore. Some businessmen from New Orleans rebuilt it. And don't you know that it burned down and then they rebuilt it again? So Laura Plantation is still in existence, but it really is a reproduction. The original house was pretty much a rectangular building didn't have inside hallways. The galleries often ran around the house. In this case, it's only a gallery in the front and one in the back. The gallery served as a hallway. In the Louisiana climate, it was helpful to have the house on piers, not for flooding, but for cooling. In summer, it could be used as living quarters if the heat was too intense. In winter, they could live upstairs. In Laura's case, they were using the downstairs more for storage, and the owners of Laura, the original owners, got into the wine business and imported wine from the Bordeaux area, and that was their storage facility before selling it to, plantation owners and probably in New Orleans too. The rooms were simple. They were all en enfilade, we say in French, so one after the other, as the gallery served as a hallway. The French didn't come with that idea right away. It started with the Indians, actually. The Louisiana Indians, and it was really amazing to discover that there were some Indians that built on the natural levees of the Mississippi. So they were building up on piers, and they were also using tree branches to weave in and out, and then they were slapping some mud and horsehair, or not horsehair, but moss or stuff like that. Does it remind you of anything? Bousillage. The French adopted the technique because in France you would have the timbers going in different directions, and then you would fill it with bricks. But the bricks did not work well for the Louisiana climate, and so the French adopted the Indian technique and blended it with their own. The timbering is, from what I understand, the trussing is Norman, from Normandy, but the rest was inspired by the Indians. I discovered something really interesting about those Indians. There was, and I'll have to read it out of here because I don't remember those names. There was a group of Indians named the Colapisa Indians, and they were not at all, living in little huts or disorganized or anything like that. They had built a city between Baton Rouge and New Orleans on a natural levee, a city that was 7 miles long, very well organized, and named Tabiscania. Yes, Tabiscania. It was about the midpoint between New Orleans and Baton Rouge. It was 7 miles long, and it housed about 1,000 inhabitants. And their houses, when the French met with them, their houses were the ones that were built with the weaving of twigs or branches and putting some mud in between. So that was a really good system for the Louisiana climate because it was cool. And another thing the Indians had was they had an overhang on the edge of those small houses. And the overhang is what, from what I read, is what was inspiring the French to build those galleries on the outside. It protected the inside from too much sun in summer or too much rain, so it was really, it was a blending of two cultures, really. This is Destrehan, and we're going to talk now about the architecture of those early houses. Destrehan was built in 1787, and it was also just like the one we saw before, just like Laura, built the same way, like this. Oops, sorry. Just like this. And I'll show you the plan now. Just like this one, you see, it ends, it's a rectangle. It ends at square. Oop. So this is the original building of Destrehan. This one had the gallery. It had a full gallery around it, had stairs going up. This was living quarters in summer, and this was living quarters in winter. I don't think the attic served for much purpose, but storage. In 1812, as fortunes started to rise, the owners of Destrehan started making additions to kind of go with the flavor of the day. So they added 2 wings. They were called garçonnières, and they have separate entries, but they are not really typical of the garçonnière that we know, in other plantations. They're really small, but they're well balanced. In the 1840s, when the fashion came to imitate the Greco-Roman architectural style, They changed their little colonnettes here, which were separate, and they put those large columns. They changed the windows and turned the plantation to the flavor of the day, which was probably one of the most elegant architectural addition in Louisiana that we still have. And this is a drawing of it that dates from about the time mid-19th century. Oh, what my screen is all warped. Of course, with the rise of large profits and wealth, we start seeing buildings that get bigger and bigger, and money is flowing. The owners are going to Europe, and they're bringing back beautiful things, and they're hiring architects in New Orleans to make not just the house nicer, but their surroundings. They build gardens, and of course, the house is more than ever now a status symbol. Some of these people who are building houses go totally, way overboard. This is the Victorian overboard style. This is San Francisco, and something I didn't know is San Francisco is not named after the city of San Francisco. It's named after the French word Saint-Frusquin. And Saint-Frusquin is an expression we say like, oh, you've really lost your Saint-Frusquin, meaning you've really lost all your possessions. You've really, you've lost. Frusquin was an old slang word, medieval slang word for clothes. Nobody knows really why or where it comes from. They can't find, they cannot connect it to anything in earlier languages, so it just pops up in the language. And eventually, by the 18th century, it started becoming like not just the clothes, but all your possessions. And so some of the local people said about this plantation owners, they said, well, you've really lost all your Saint-Frusquin, meaning you've really lost all your belongings. Yeah, you lost all your possessions, all your money to build this. So chances are...
Where is that?
That one is, if you take the river road, it's on the west bank, and from New Orleans, it's probably the closest to New Orleans than to Ocala. So whenever you cross, the first bridge you cross going north, I don't remember what's the name of that bridge, it's on the west bank. They're all close to each other, in that spot. So if you take the river road and you follow this, you're going to start with, I think it's San Francisco, because its twin has been destroyed. The other one that was nearby has been lost. And then you go up the river road, eventually you make it to Ocala. So it's close to New Orleans, this one, closer. Of course, there were other plantations, all over Louisiana. This one, I couldn't pass it up because Melrose is so unique. It was in Natchitoches, and what I marvel about this one is that it was a free woman of color that owned it. Her dad was French, and her mom was mulatto probably, and it was a love story from all I could gather. It was really a love story. There were lots of kids. It was illegal in Louisiana to marry across races, so the French had a way around it. The French always loved their exotic girls, whether it's in Africa or in Louisiana or with the Indians in Nova Scotia. The French just love their girls, local girls, and Melrose is famous for that little building in the back that the owner, the first owner, Marie-Thérèse Coincoin, I think, remembered from childhood when she was really little. I think it was the mom. And that was the style of building that was in the village in Africa that she remembered. It was not until the 1980s, I think, that someone went to Africa and looked at buildings to see if that was really identifiable or not. And sure enough, there is an area in West Africa, if I remember right, where the houses, they're not brick, they're probably different construction material, but the roofs are the same. They look really interesting. I don't know how they can do that. It looks like it's a very solid roof. Now we're getting into my, I don't know, what I have at heart. This section is about the Louisiana plantations that we still have and the ones that we have lost. At the peak of the plantation system, if I can put it like that, right on the eve of the Civil War. Between Natchez and New Orleans, there were 400 plantations. Off the top of my head, I can count probably 10 or 12 today. If I dig a little bit, and some that are not open to the public, I may find a little more. But it is a terrible loss that we have experienced here. Those plantations were between Natchez and also New Orleans, was where more than half of the millionaires in America lived. So this is like Louis XIV, in France. This was a huge abundance of money, and these people, some used it wisely, some not, but these people built these huge mansions to their own glory, I guess. But to come across this kind of building rush, there has to be money. And I don't think we will ever see again a concentration of money to the point that there will be buildings that will be erected. It's the same in France. Nobody is building a castle anymore. Nobody is building Versailles. If we lose them, they're lost. They're lost forever. And these plantations in Louisiana were so unique and so spectacular, and they were so numerous that when they could have been saved, people said, well, we lose one, what's one and another? We have 400 or 500, what does it matter? And from this kind of behavior, we ended up where we are today. These two are Belgrove and Nottoway. They were about 2 miles from each other. Belgrove, they were built at the same time, about the 1840s, 1850s. The two owners they knew each other. They were rivals with each other, friendly rivalry. And they wanted to have the biggest and the bestest. And so this is the result. We all know Nottoway, but I don't know many people who are familiar with Belgrove. Belgrove was just, it's the same architect too for both. Belgrove was such an elegant mix of Greco-Roman, Tuscan, Italian style, very harmonious. And it's a sad story because the Civil War is the reason why the people lost it. And then it passed from hand to hand. Extremely expensive to keep up, extremely expensive to, what are you going to do with that, especially around 1900. So it fell gradually into more and more disrepair. Some people bought it thinking when they're going to save it, they're going to, like Oak Alley. It didn't work out. It was just, there was too much. It involved too much money. And eventually it was like, crumbling down. And there are two conflicting stories about how it met its end. One is that the river caught up with it and flooded the foundations, and the building became unstable. The other one is that it burned down. Either way, we lost it somewhere in the 1940s. It was really sad. They are huge. Both of them were huge. One was 58,000 square feet. The other one is 55,000 square feet. My house is 1,500 square feet. So I thought, whoa. Just to keep up these buildings, you had to have a huge staff, And once slavery is abolished, how are you going to pay this staff, And it's the same with Europe. Once you get into having a democracy, giving the power to the people don't want to go clean up the castles for $1 an hour or something like that. So they're very expensive. Same problem on the other side. This is Belgrove, somewhere in the 1940s. There was a famous photographer. His name was John Laughlin, John Clarence Laughlin, I think, and he took a lot of pictures of those old plantations on the River Road in the late 40s, early 50s. And so this is what Belgrove looked like in around 1945. A whole wing has collapsed here. And like I said earlier, we lost a lot of them to neglect, to fire, then some vandals came, stole. Belgrove was rumored to have all the doorknobs and the keyholes in the building were solid silver. So a lot of people came and grabbed those things. I don't know if it was really solid silver, but if it was even seriously silver coated, It probably was something that people wanted to put in their house. Hopefully they didn't melt it down, hopefully. Hopefully it's somewhere. What shocked me when I did this research is to discover how little protection those homes have. Within city limits, there are some laws that protect them. But once you're outside city limits, like Ocali, not away, along the river road, there are really no protection, no laws that say, this is a national heritage building. We should not, we should protect it. There's nothing. So some of these plantations had children, and the children had children, and so they multiply. And with the Louisiana laws, which are the same as in France and Belgium, the property became owned by too many people who could not get together and get organized. There were too many people going this way, that way. So a lot of these homes fell into abandonment and neglect because there may have been 100 heirs to it, and one wanted to save it, the other one wanted to level it, and nothing can happen unless you have the approval of everybody. And so we lost more plantations like that. These are lost forever. This is Belle Grove, around 1945. It had 365 openings, counting windows and doors, one for every day of the year. Seven Oaks now is something that was really sad. I didn't even know there was Seven Oaks. If you remember, Seven Oaks is near Baton Rouge, was near Baton Rouge. And Seven Oaks had 7 columns. It was beautiful architecturally designed. It was a New Orleans architect as well. It had, you knew where the front was and where the side was. The front had 8 columns, and the sides had 7. So, 2, 4, 6, this is the side. There's 7 columns. So the front would have been either there or there. Seven Oaks fell into disrepair. Some local people tried to save it, couldn't raise enough money, so it sat there, and then eventually it lost its, how could I say it? There's another picture of it, I think. Oh no, this is Seven Oaks, huh? Yeah. This is Seven Oaks. Okay. How am I going to explain this? Seven Oaks was built, this is the one that was opposite Audubon Park. Yeah, I said, yeah. The owner, the people who built it were Zerang, and that was a German name. They built it at the time of the sugar explosion and sugar boom. Lots of money. This man had 4 boys and four sons, 4 daughters. And when the Civil War broke out, he was really a strong supporter of the Confederate cause. Put a lot of money into the Confederate Army, and even encouraged all 4 of his sons to go and fight. After the war, only one came back. The other 3 were killed, and the one who came back was handicapped. He was injured and incapacitated. His 4 daughters, during the war, I guess maybe they were praying very hard, I don't know. After the war, they all entered a convent. So this left the plantation with only one son who was unable to handle it, and eventually in 1861 he sold the plantation to a Spaniard. This is an interesting story. This Spaniard, his name was Pablo Sala, and he bought the plantation around 1861, 1870, something like that. And he turned it into a resort. I mean, I'm talking like a resort, modern resort. He imported people from Europe to come and stay at his plantation, and he had some garden architects come and spruce up the gardens. And it was a tourist attraction, in the late 1800s. I didn't even know someone could have this kind of vision. On some days, on weekends, people from New Orleans would come too, or from Baton Rouge with the riverboats, with the steamboats. On some of these days, this plantation could handle 20,000 people a day. It's like, I couldn't believe it. It was a huge property, so the gardens were large, but people came to visit it. it's almost like figures of, late 20th century. So this Mr. Sala, he called it Columbia Garden. He renamed it, and the attraction was really for the gardens. But there was just one little tiny problem. Before the Civil War, the railroad companies were granted eminent domain by the state and by the federal government. So they could determine which land they wanted to lay the tracks on, and they had the power to buy that land, and people had to, sell it, period. So the railroad company wanted to bring the tracks through Seven Oaks Plantation, not the building, but the property. And Mr. Zerang said, yes, I'll sell it to you. He didn't have a choice anyway, but he said, but on the condition that you do not put a train station here on my property. And they kind of agreed to it. After the Civil War, though, it was the Missouri Pacific Railroad, decided they wanted to put a train station there. And so Mr. Zerang went to court, and the battle was fought all the way to the Supreme Court of Louisiana, and he lost, because really it was an agreement that had been given to the railroad company. So the railroad company, sure enough, and you can see the tracks. See, this is a railroad yard, and they did build their train station before Mr. Zerang died. So when the Spaniard, Mr. Sala, Pablo Sala, bought it, he may have capitalized on that train station, by the way, but I know a lot of people were coming through with the steamboats. He also had an idea. He had bought all that property. There was a huge amount of land. He didn't have the resources to farm it. So he was another man of vision. He started parceling it out like a subdivision. This is, he died in 1894. So he did this way before dying. This is the first time I hear of a subdivision. And it was laid out just like a modern subdivision, cutting a road, parceling out, and trying to sell that piece by piece. It was not very successful. Most people were not interested in it until the hurricane that wiped out Ile Dernière and some of those summer resorts, and Bayou Caminada, that the name, or Chenière Caminada, I don't remember. The people who lived there were all of a sudden without housing, without land to put back a house on, and so he sold all the parcels after that hurricane. Unfortunately, he died in 1994, and from that point on, that was really the demise of Seven Oaks. The railroad company either bought the rest of the plantation or had some rights because of the original, eminent domain laws. They didn't do anything to it. They rented it out to one or the other, but they really didn't do any kind of upkeeping. And it lasted for a while like that, with people going in and out. At one point, there was a serious leak in the roof to the point that the building was not livable anymore. And the railroad company didn't do anything. They said, well, you just get out and that's it. We're not going to rent it anymore. And so the building sat and sat. In 1965, Hurricane Betsy hit New Orleans and damaged the roof even a little bit more. But there was the beginning of a community awareness. People started thinking about, maybe this is something valuable, maybe it's our heritage, maybe we should save it. And the local people in that little community, which by the way was called at first Salaville, because it was Pablo Sala, was renamed by the railroad company West We Go. West We Go. And I had seen that name, West We Go, I would think, when I was traveling in New Orleans. So I never knew it really meant West We Go. Yeah. So they leased out the property. So the building itself was left abandoned. They leased out some of the property to an oil company that built those tanks there. And it was just leased, though. It was still the railroad company that owned it. The local people, after Hurricane Betsy, decided that we'll try to save it. And they did a fundraiser. They had a bal champêtre, which is like a Fedodo outdoors and tried to raise money. And they raised some money, but not enough to fix the roof, seriously. Not to mention that, of course, they could fix it, but it was still not their property. It was still the property of the railroad company, and the railroad company didn't care. A little bit later, somewhere in the early 70s, there was a renewal of interest for the plantation. Unfortunately, the police jury of Jefferson Parish felt that the plantation was a liability. And I don't know how they could think that it was a liability because it was not their property. But they started feeling that it should be leveled because if someone was walking around there or fell around there, that the police jury would be sued, or I don't understand how they could feel that way. But they didn't want to do anything to that. They wanted to raise it, level it. The railroad company wanted to level it. The local people who are living literally across from Audubon Park felt that it really could be an asset to keep that plantation. And they started working so hard. It was just a little group of people, but the local representative, I don't remember his name. Do I have his name there? Yeah, Alario. John Alario worked really hard with the people in Baton Rouge. He even enlisted the help of Governor Edwards, who vouched $750,000 towards the repair and the bringing back to life Seven Oaks Plantation. The railroad company, of course, being the owners, had the last word, and they simply did not want to do it. And they had the support of the police jury of Jefferson Parish, and one day they just brought in the bulldozers, and the thing was leveled. After having support from the state, and it was 1975, or 77, I think, when they leveled it. Lost forever. It was...
He bought, he's an OBGYN person who lives in Jefferson Parish, and he bought some of the things that were in there. I don't know whether it was the columns and doors and whatnot. He lives in Jefferson Parish, close to Lake Pontchartrain.
Salvaged.
And but he salvaged what could be salvaged from Seven Oaks.
Yeah, I don't need to remind you that the Charleston Hotel was being gutted out some years ago. I don't remember if it was 30 years ago, and Dr. Joe, I don't remember his name, Cash, was walking by, and the workers were dumping light fixtures, and he said, "Well, can I have it?" And they said, "Sure, take it home." Kept it home for 30 years, and then gave it to the Charleston Hotel after it was renovated. But that's just not far back. It's even later than Seven Oaks, and this was a little jewel that was downtown Lake Charles, and being just gutted out. And if they had the means to level it for free, it would have been gone that day.
They did that from just across the street.
Yeah, to the Majestic.
The arcade theater.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
arcade theater.
Yeah.
I know, but there were people who put it on the register and it was vacant and raising the money, and it was a vandal on Thanksgiving Day that set the fire. But I mean, it's the same thing.
And incidentally, this plantation was on the Register of Historic Places when it was leveled. That was no protection. It's absolutely, there's no legal protection for those buildings. If the politicians, the local politicians, are against it, it's pretty much a lost battle. So it's really disheartening.
It was really, I grew up in Metairie, and
Oh.
our high school used to play West Wego and Marrero and Gretna, and so went over there frequently. But it really was in terrible disrepair. This was in the late 40s after the Second World War.
The railroad company didn't want to fix the roof, and the people who managed to raise some money couldn't raise enough to do it.
Yeah,
So I can imagine.
were there, and the roof was bad, but the I don't know about the interior doors, but they still had some of the exterior doors and windows.
We have friends in New Orleans who buy old homes and then turn them into bed and breakfast and then sell them, and one year they bought, about 20 years ago, they bought a house on Britannia that was, from the outside it was so beautiful. It was just gorgeous. It was one of the old plantations in the Garden District that had a long, narrow strip of land going to the river. And Peter told us, do you want to see it? Oh, I love old houses and I love old castles, especially. I grew up in Belgium and there was a medieval castle right around the corner from my house. So we were playing in the old ruins, you know. I have a big imagination. So we went to look at the house, and from the outside it looked fine. It was a wide plantation style house with Corinthian columns and, you know, beautiful. He said, well, wait till you go inside. He said, we have to fix the roof. I went inside. There was a section of the roof you could see through. From the ground floor, you could see, not the ground floor, from the living floor, which was elevated. You could see, in one corner, you could see right through to the sky. And there were some birds nesting there too, and on the floor there was. He also showed us some of the other rooms. In one room, there was debris, and I don't know if it was from, did things fall and then they parked them there? I don't know. There was plaster that had fallen. It was so high that it blocked a door that went to a closet. It was the height of a door. It was almost 8 feet high, going down, you know, in the middle you could walk, but it was basically like that. He said to fix the roof, just to fix the leak, not to repair the whole roof, just to fix that area, was going to be $100,000. You know, they did it. They managed to raise the money, and then they turned around, and the plantation was used as a bed and breakfast. We stayed there. It was never quite completely renovated because it was always a matter of having enough money, you know. But they were renting it out as a bed and breakfast. You just had, you know, plain walls. You know, you didn't have. You had a little bit of furniture, but nothing. You know, nothing like the plantations had. And then eventually they turned around and they sold it. And I think they made a little profit on it. But it's a money pit. You know, it takes a community. It takes a village to save them. You know, they can't be saved by one or two people. Unlike Ocala, Ocala was lucky enough to have people who could do it. And it's sad. This plantation, you can see how little it is compared to the property. And this is just a section of the property, and it was leveled in 1 hour. You know.
Where is the plantation? Is that lower right? Is that
Yes, this is the plantation here.
I almost missed that.
This is the plantation. The little widow's, is that what do you call it? Widow's Peak? Widow's Walk was added during the Civil War. And I'm not sure if it was to look out at the Mississippi. The Mississippi is right here. I mean, it was really, really close to the Mississippi. This is a loss to disinterest. You know, it's and if that plantation had stood, can you imagine what kind of attraction it would be? It's just across from Audubon Park. I mean, the millions of tourists, you know. Yeah, it would have been, for Jefferson Parish, it would have been a fantastic economic, you know, incentive, boost. And they let it go. That's people without vision, you know. We need to think of that when we vote for people. This is Seven Oaks, taken also in the 1940s. Is that how you remember it?
It looked a tad worse than that.
Maybe this is the good side.
The roof was really in worse.
Yeah, and this is partially hidden by the tree too. Okay, oops, this one. Yeah, this is still Seven Oaks. You can count the columns. This is the facade or the back. I mean, probably the facade. This is how you remember it?
Yeah, I just don't remember the roof looking like that, but maybe it did.
Was the roof caved in completely?
No, it just looked like they had shingles missing and maybe
Oh, yeah.
some holes.
Well, I'm sure Hurricane Betsy didn't help matters if the roof was already in bad shape. Now this is another one that's lost. This is Uncle Sam Plantation. Uncle Sam was also built in the 1830s, also from the sugar boom. The owners had an architect design the main house, and this is unique. The architect was asked to design the outbuildings and the slaves' quarters in the same style. This is the only plantation ever built where the outbuildings match in style and are built by an architect, and it's not some pieces of board that are slapped together. You can see this is the main house, and on the left is a section of the slave quarters. There's not many pictures of this one left. On the left, this is the slave quarters and the main house in the background, and on the right is the main house with the pigeonnier in the back. A lot of plantations, whenever they were a lot of them were started by French families, although not all of them. But the French, the aristocratic French in France, had little buildings for their pigeons, and they were called pigeonniers, and they were raising pigeons for the fun of it. They were breeding them and a little bit like people do with dogs maybe today. They were getting pretty colors and this kind. So having a pigeonnier on the grounds meant that you were a person of means, and in your leisure, you just, spend your time trying to breed animals. So a lot of Louisiana plantations found themselves, especially if there was a French owner somewhere along the way. Parlange has 2 pigeonniers. Uncle Sam had some pigeonniers. I think Homer House has pigeonnier too. And they really, today they're just decorative objects. There are no birds in there. But they're kind of cute. I do like them too. I think they add to, it's like a little, when you have a gazebo in your backyard, it kind of adds to it. Yeah. And of course, at Uncle Sam, the pigeonniers were also designed by the architect who designed the whole ensemble. Oh, I forgot to say.
Where was?
Uncle Sam? Uncle Sam was just south of New Orleans, of Baton Rouge. In the big map where I show you Baton Rouge on the right side, it's on the east side of the river, and it's about, I don't think it's 10 miles south of New Orleans. This plantation, a lot of people tried to save it too. It didn't go to the governor of Louisiana or I don't think it went through any kind of legislature, trying to save it. But there were people who were in high places and managed to contact someone important in Washington, D.C. And the National Park Service looked into that. It may be connected with the fact that a lot of these plantations were used by the Tulane School of Architecture as examples of, classical Roman, classical Greek, Tuscan, and so on. And so the professors from Tulane took their students, as early as the before 1920, they were already taking students along the river road to study and the proportions and study the building of those, the techniques for building such vast houses. So it may be someone from Tulane that was connected to someone in Washington, D.C. Anyway, the National Park Service was interested in saving it because it was that unique. If this one had been saved, this would have been the most unique architectural setting in the world. That's how valuable it was. The owners, it's not even the owners, it was expropriated to expand the levee. And so some plantations, when the levees along the Mississippi were expanded, especially after the 1927 flood, they were transported a little bit further out. I don't know how you can do that, but they've done that with churches and castles from Europe, and they built them in California. So they knew how to transport, a whole building and move it to a safer location. This one, they didn't bother with it. They just raised everything and put the levee where the house was. So there's not even a site for it. There's a little marker on the side of the road, but actually where the house was is now under the levee. What is so sad is that 3 days after the plantation was leveled, the telegram arrived saying that the National Park Service was interested in it. They could have stopped the Corps of Engineers from expanding the levee, and give them time to save the plantation, move it somewhere else. That's so sad. And so out of 400 houses that were between Natchez and Baton Rouge, how many have we lost to either stupidity, neglect, or total lack of interest? It's so sad. Some of them were lucky. Some of them survived. Oak Alley was saved by, I think it was a doctor that bought it somewhere in the 40s, and him and his wife started the restorations. Then they died, and then it passed on to someone else who was also committed to restoring the house. And it was a tourist attraction already when I came in '76. So I don't know exactly when they opened, but it's been in business for a long time, and it is a big tourist attraction. People in Europe know of Oak Alley. The famous pictures you see, like Ansel Adams pictures of Yosemite National Park. Everybody in Europe knows what it is. Well, Oak Alley, you show a picture of Oak Alley to anyone in France, they know what it is. You know, not many others, but they know what it is. Chrétien-Point now did it by the skin of its teeth. I mean, they almost didn't make it, because I remember I saw Chrétien-Point when I first saw it. It was a brick building with hay coming out of it, and it was cows it was a stable, and it was pitiful looking, and I thought, I'll never see that one again. But someone, and I think it's someone from Lafayette who bought it and started restoring it, and then today it's passed hand a few times, but today it's a bed and breakfast. It's also a place where you can have a wedding. You know, it's a beautiful, beautiful setting. This picture is, and you can see the shutters kind of hanging. This picture is from around the time when it was used as a cattle stable. Today, this is how they are, and Chrétien-Point is really beautiful. You know, they have done a great job, because it's really out of the way. So it's not by the river. You don't have tourists from New Orleans. So Chrétien-Point is probably a unique case where local people use it, more so than people from, you know, overseas.
Where is that one located?
Pardon?
Where is it located?
Chrétien-Point near Lafayette. It's near Sunset. Yeah.
And they do have a yearly Civil War reenactment there.
Oh, okay, yeah. And when I visited it the first time, but the other times after that as well, they claimed that the back staircase of Chrétien-Point during the Civil War, the lady of the house was coming down the stairs, a soldier was coming up, if I remember correctly, and some shooting ensued, and they claimed that the inspiration for Scarlett O'Hara was this lady, and the staircase was, you know, magnified for the movie, but it was the same, was the story from Chrétien-Point. Yeah, when you get to Lafayette, you take Highway 49 north, and it's just a few miles, yeah.
It's open to the public?
Yeah, it's open to the public, and you can sleep there, and you can host an event. So if you go, you actually have to call in advance to make sure there's not an event. They're not going to let people tour the house if they have a wedding or something like that. But if for the bed and breakfast, yes, they will let you tour it. I know for our 10th anniversary, I think I surprised my husband and got one room for 2 nights at Nottoway. And the one thing was we had to be out of the room, you know, between 11 and 5 or something like that, because people were going to come and tour it. Our belongings were safe, but they wanted to, you know, you could tour it while people were staying at Nottoway. And I think it's the same at Chrétien-Point.
I'm going to
Jenny and I were
ask-
talking about the trees.
Uh-huh.
That at some point in time there was a wedding and the owner of the plantation had spider webs.
That's
Was that?
that's not Oak Alley. That's Valcourt-Amy's Pine Alley.
But
Yeah.
that's the one where they had the.
It was trees, but it was not oaks.
not that.
It was, yeah. It was, yeah. It's Valcourt-Amy, and it's lost. That plantation
gone?
was lost. Yeah. It was not far from Oak Alley.
I'm going to ask that the rest of the comments and questions be held until the end,
Okay.
because there is a time element with the video. So
That's
if
true.
you would please continue and have the questions.
Now, of course, part of the plantation is the beautiful setting, and Oak Alley would not be Oak Alley without its Oak Alley. And that is another problem, because few people cared much about the trees, because, you know, in Louisiana you have a tree that comes out of the ground. Within 50 years you have looking like a mature oak, so you don't worry about an old oak. So I'll show you something about the trees too. These are the 2 oldest ones, among the 2 oldest ones in Louisiana. Of course, Destrehan, you're all familiar with it. And Laura, like I said earlier, was built from the ground up from the architectural plans that they had for the house. Destrehan, which has such lovely and well coordinated additions, was in terrible shape when I first saw it. There was no lawn. You could tour it, but it was, you know, look at it yourself and figure out what's going on. The paint was falling off the walls and so on. So there is obviously a very determined effort in trying to save them, and that is very comforting. On the left is Greenwood Plantation, which burned down and was rebuilt, is currently a bed and breakfast and a very, it's near Baton Rouge and is a very north of Baton Rouge towards San Francisco. A business venture. On the right, I don't remember the name of this one, but this was taken also in the 40s, and that plantation is probably no longer, you know, and people didn't even know the names. I mean, they were just like. On the left is St. Joseph Plantation, which I didn't even know existed. It's next door to Ocala. It was owned by the same family, and this one has not been turned into a tourism attraction. So even though it is saved and the family is committed to it, it is not, you can see the drive going to the house, and you can look at the roof. It's a tin roof. You know, it's the basic repairs, secured to save the building itself. But we're a long way from having the plantation back to where it was when it was built. On the right is one of the Doric columns from Belgrove Plantation. And that's where I'm coming to. The surroundings, of course, are very important. To have a plantation, you know, with just grass around it is not doesn't project the exact image of what it was like when they built it. For Ocala, the location for the building was done, the choice of the location was done in relationship to the alley of oaks that was already there and probably there for about, the oaks were probably about 100 years old when Ocala was built. And this is part of Ocala here. Here's a famous oak that was named Loch Bro, and it was also along the river road. This one was on the plantation that was owned by a petrochemical company, something like that, and they wanted to make room for a parking lot. Guess? They cut the tree. Now the tree, you know, there were parts of the tree that were not healthy, so they said, well, you know, it's going to fall down anyway, so we're going to cut it. And when they cut it and they counted the rings, it was more than 1,000 years old. It was gone, too late. It would be better to let it die of its natural death than just, you know, do this. And this is the end. This is an oak from Destrehan Plantation. And when I say this is the end, for now, is because hopefully we're going to save more of them. You know, hopefully there's going to be more awareness about the gems that they are, that we're losing. And that's it. Thank you for coming.